For the word of the week this week, we have 3 words, and this is in response to a viewer question about Philippians chapter 2, verse 12. And before we get into our words of the week, let's read verses 12 and 13. This is from the ESV. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Fear and trembling. The question this week is about the word fear in verse 12 and how we are to take that word fear. So I said we're going to have 3 words of the week. There are 3 basic terms for fear in the New Testament. Let's take a look at all of them. So first up we have deilia, and deilia is cowardness or timidity, an actual inherent fear within a person. The second one is eulebeia, and eulebeia is awe in the presence of God. If you think of eu as good and labeia as the root for lambano, for taking, for receiving, we're talking about a good reception or a proper response to being in the presence of God. So when you're dealing with holy things, eulebeia is the appropriate reaction, not in terror, but in respect, in reverence, in awe. Then we get the third word, which is phobos. And you're familiar with phobos probably more than any other, with various and sundry phobias. The interesting thing about phobos is when we're talking about fright or terror, it can be the cause of the fright or the terror or the effect of feeling fright or terror. And it can also be used to express awe or respect or reverence in light of epiphany, right? A realization that you're dealing with something bigger than you and you are struck with not a terrorized fear, but respectful fear, like, oh, this is too much for me. So phobos has its roots in a very old verb, and that verb is phebomai, and phebomai means I flee. So we're talking about that whether it be the stimulus or whether it be the reaction to the stimulus, we're talking about something that makes us want to withdraw, right? Whether it be out of a sense of awe or out of a sense of, I'd better get away from here before this thing eats me, right? Either way, that's the root of it, phebomai, I flee. Now, phobos in secular ancient Greek is, it's not fair to call it secular, it is cultic, but phobos is a minor Greek god, a son of Ares, a god of war, who is also a lesser god of war. And in the literature from I believe it's Homer, there is a temple to Phobos in Sparta. So fear and awe being a sort of a martial issue, a military issue, makes some sense, right? We're dealing with violent, terrible, heroic acts, and there's phobos involved in all of that. But we're not dealing with ancient Greek, we're dealing with Koine in the New Testament context. So today let's take a look at each of our 3 words for fear, and let's start with deilia. This is from 2 Timothy 1:7. All the readings today will be from the ESV with the Koine supplied. For God gave us a spirit not of fear, deilias, but of power and love and self-control. So this is that timidity or cowardice. In fact, the King James translates the word here, timidity, not a spirit of timidity. So here we have that inherent cowardice. God didn't give you a spirit of cowardness, rather a spirit of power and love and self-control. So that one's fairly self-explanatory, and we will move on to our second word of the week, eulabeia, and we'll start with Hebrews 5, verse 7. In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverence, eulabeios, reverence. So in other words, knowing to whom he is speaking, his posture toward that one is not fearful in the sense of he's afraid of God, but the appropriate respect and reverence for the one to whom he is speaking. Right? So that's our second word, eulabeia, here, eulabeios in the genitive. Let's stick with Hebrews and go to verse 7a. I'm only reading the first part of the verse because that's the part that's relevant, and this is speaking of Noah. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen. What does that mean, events as yet unseen? There had never been rain before, and Noah was instructed to build an ark. In reverent fear, eulabeia, constructed an ark for the saving of his household. So here we have this great illustration of our second word of the week, eulabeia, to receive well, to have an appropriate response. God comes to Noah and says, it's going to rain. Wait, it's never rained before. It's going to rain so much that I'm going to wash the world with water. And I want you to build this ark. And what do we hear about Noah's reaction to his interaction with God? He reacts with reverence, with fear, reverent fear, the ESV calls it, because he says, I don't know what rain is, I've never seen rain, but because of this one with whom I'm interacting, in reverent fear, I shall do what I was told. And he builds the ark and saves humanity, right? Pretty great stuff. So that's our second word of the week, eulabeia. Let us go on to our third word of the week, phobos, and we're starting in Romans 13:3. For rulers are not a terror, phobos, see here it's being used as the cause of fear. Rulers are not a terror, phobos, to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear, phobesthai, of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval. In other words, if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't have any cause for fear. So if you don't want to be afraid of the rulers, don't do anything wrong. Have you ever noticed that when you're driving, even if you're pretty sure you're not doing anything wrong, when you see a police car, there's that split-second little sense of terror. Like, oh, hold on, let me double check that I'm not doing anything wrong. Am I within the speed limit? If I'm turning, did I use my signal? Did I come to a full stop, et cetera, et cetera? Because part of us doesn't want to be at risk for punishment. So when we see the police car in that case is phobos in the sense that it's the cause of the terror. And then that little twinge of concern, of anxiety, would be the result, the effect, phobos, of that terror. Let's carry on and look at one more. This is in Mark chapter 16, verse 8. This is after the resurrection at the empty tomb. And they've already talked to the angels and are leaving that space. And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. And the word for afraid here is ephabunta. So they were scared from what they had witnessed. You'd be scared too. Everybody who reads it in a modern context, particularly as believers, finds himself saying they were scared. Well, Jesus told them that he was going to rise again and all that kind of thing. But thus far in your life, count on your fingers with me right now all the people that you've seen die and rise from the dead 3 days later. Okay? I suspect we're all at a solid zero. So for these people who are experiencing this, they are afraid in a reverent awe sense, and probably also in the sense of, how do I go and tell people that this my Lord, who was crucified, who was put to death by the state, is alive again? It's a frightening proposition, right? Pretty amazing stuff. So all the way back to the beginning, to the question that our viewer sent in, what about in Philippians chapter 2, verse 12? Let's read it one more time quickly. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. So fear here is phobos. And I think there's a good argument to be made that within the context, we can see it as both reverence for God, work out your own salvation in reverence for God, but also with a little bit of sense of concern for your future, right? Well, the opposite of salvation is to be lost, to be condemned, to be on your way to the lake of fire. So perhaps, and I think it's likely, that Paul here is using phobos in both senses, or in an amalgam of the two senses. Work out your salvation with an appropriate awe for the God who saves, as well as a concern for the alternate to that salvation. Phobos is our third word of the week. Eulabeia, our second word of the week, which is to receive in an appropriate sense, receive well, in a fitting manner, the revelation of God. And then Deleia, cowardice or timidity, our three words of the week. So for our viewer who sent in the question, I hope that helps with Philippians 2, verse 12. And for everyone who's watching, those are the three fears in the New Testament. And I hope that you will fear not and carry on in your pursuit of koine in the New Testament. Remember that grammar is great, as is vocabulary, so that we see where words come from. Imagine phobos from phebomai, I flee. Something had to make you flee. That's fear, right? Great stuff. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you again next time. And until then, charis kai reina humin, grace and peace to you.